You didn't lose the argument because you lacked the right words. You lost because you used too many. Stop bleeding out your sanity to feed psychological parasites. Discover the terrifying godlike power of absolute silence and the mind-shattering revelation waiting at the very end that changes everything. Communication and the tragedy of herd morality. Imagine a room where the sharp echo of a slammed door still lingers in the heavy air. The screaming has finally stopped. The argument is over, and you are left entirely alone, staring at an empty chair. Your chest is heaving, your pulse is a deafening drum against your temples, and a paralyzing, cold exhaustion courses through your entire nervous system. You held the facts. Logic was entirely on your side. The absolute truth belonged to you. Yet, as you stand there in the suffocating silence, why do you feel like a conquered prisoner? Why are you drowning in the humiliating frustration of someone who has just been entirely stripped of their power? The deeply unsettling answer to this will shatter everything you thought you knew about human conflict. You did not lose because you lacked the right arguments. You lost, catastrophically, because you used far too many of them. The inner multiverse welcomes you to a journey that will fundamentally rewire your mind. If you are ready to stop being a hostage to the emotional chaos of others and want to uncover the dark psychology of human interaction, please hit the subscribe button to support our channel. Your support fuels our drive to bring you these profound truths. Stick with me until the very final second of this video, because what you are about to discover will permanently alter the way you wield your own psychological power, and you simply cannot afford to miss the ultimate revelation at the end. We exist in a society brutally obsessed with having the last word, driven by a compulsive, agonizing need to explain, justify, and emerge victorious in every petty verbal slaughter. A toxic, obsolete belief system has infected your consciousness, whispering a fatal lie, that the one who remains silent is the weak one. It convinces you that if you do not instantly fight back, if you do not immediately prove your innocence and lay out your flawless reasoning, you will be crushed into oblivion. But behavioral science and existential philosophy reveal a naked, terrifying reality. The more words you violently hurl to defend yourself against a mind that has no intention of listening, the more you bleed out your own strength. You are directly handing over the master key of your emotional sanity to your abuser. The very act of screaming to prove you are right is the most tragic, undeniable evidence that you are desperately dependent on their validation. The brilliant German philosopher, entity, people, Friedrich Nietzsche Ihnen as the decaying remnants of what he called herd morality. It is a psychological prison where an individual's entire sense of worth is heavily chained to the arbitrary judgments of the crowd. Your primal, desperate hunger to be understood and to belong has mutated you into the perfect victim for manipulators. A manipulator does not enter an argument seeking the truth or a higher understanding. They are hunting purely for your emotional collapse. When they throw out a baseless provocation or an absurd, piercing critique, they are meticulously laying down a psychological snare. The exact microsecond you hastily open your mouth to correct them, to frantically explain your side of the story, you step blindly into that trap. You instantaneously fall from the graceful height of a sovereign individual into a mere biological puppet twitching wildly on their strings. Nietzsche ruthlessly stripped away the disguise of this behavior, revealing the profound cowardice hiding behind our neurotic need to explain ourselves. Attempting to forcefully shift the perspective of someone who is actively committed to misunderstanding you is not an act of noble bravery. It is a modern psychological sickness. It is as utterly delusional as trying to cure a dying patient's tuberculosis by deeply kissing them, desperately hoping your healthy immune system will magically alter their deadly bacteria. It will never happen. When you eagerly dive into the muddy, suffocating trenches of endless justification, the manipulator has already claimed their victory. They have successfully dragged you down into their dark abyss, violently beating you into submission with their vast experience in absolute unreason. You must wake up and recognize this devastating tragedy. The unbearable pain you are feeling right now does not stem from their inability to understand you. Your agony comes from the undeniable realization that you have profoundly betrayed yourself. You have degraded the immaculate, priceless value of your truth by desperately peddling it in the streets to those who never even possessed the moral currency to buy it. Part 2. The deafening roar of silence and the alchemy of detachment. To permanently cease this devastating betrayal of your own soul, you must first comprehend the terrifying, almost godlike power concealed within absolute silence. We are conditioned from birth to view silence as an agonizing void, a terrifying blank space that must be frantically filled with justifications, apologies, or counterattacks. When you are accused, your biological instinct screams at you to defend your honor, as if your very survival depends on the vocal cords vibrating in your throat. But this is the grand illusion of the modern ego. True power does not roar. True power observes. When you choose to swallow your defense and stare back with a calm, unbreakable stillness, you are engaging in the highest form of psychological alchemy. You are taking the poisonous energy they hurled at you and refusing to let it penetrate your bloodstream. Think about the sheer, unadulterated strength it takes to hold your tongue when every nerve ending in your body is begging you to fight back. It is an act of profound rebellion against your own primal programming. By refusing to engage, you are essentially rewriting the rules of the game in real time. You are communicating a message far more devastating than any brilliant counter-argument could ever achieve. You are telling them that their perspective of you is entirely irrelevant to your reality. This is the moment you reclaim your psychological sovereignty. You stop treating your words as cheap, infinite commodities to be thrown at anyone who demands them, and instead, you begin to treat your attention as the rarest, most expensive currency in existence. Why should you bankrupt your emotional reserves to purchase the understanding of someone who is emotionally bankrupt themselves? The agony you feel when you hold back your words is simply the withdrawal symptom of your addiction to external validation. You are so used to seeing your reflection in the eyes of others that when you refuse to look into the mirror of a manipulator, you momentarily fear you have ceased to exist. But as the seconds tick by and the silence expands, a miraculous transformation occurs in your chest. The panicked fluttering of your heart begins to steady. The cold sweat of anxiety is replaced by a strange, grounding warmth. You realize that you do not need their permission to be right. You do not need their comprehension to be whole. The truth remains the truth, whether it is shouted from a mountaintop or held quietly in the darkest corner of a locked room. In this magnificent detachment, you build an invisible, impenetrable wall around your psyche. You become a fortress. The arrows of their false accusations, their guilt trips, and their petty provocations simply shatter against the thick stone of your indifference. You are no longer a participant in their chaotic drama. You have elevated yourself to the role of a silent spectator, watching a tragedy unfold on a stage you have already abandoned. You begin to see their words not as weapons that can harm you, but as desperate, flailing attempts to pull you back into the mud where they reside. And as you stand there, anchored in your quiet dignity, the dynamic of the entire room irreversibly shifts, setting the stage for the inevitable destruction of their psychological dominance. Part 3. The parasite's starvation and the unraveling of the aggressor. Once you lock yourself within this impenetrable fortress of silence, a violent and entirely predictable psychological unraveling begins to consume the mind of your aggressor. Manipulators, narcissists, and those deeply infected by the toxicity of the herd do not generate their own emotional life force. They are psychological parasites. They require a host to survive. Their entire sense of superiority and control is completely dependent on your emotional reaction. They need your anger, your tears, your frantic explanations, and your desperate pleas for fairness to assure themselves that they are powerful. When you look at them with deadpan, silent observation, you are instantly cutting off their oxygen supply. You plunge them into a terrifying psychological vacuum. Without your reaction to absorb the impact of their toxicity, their poison has nowhere to go but straight back into their own nervous system. This is the agonizing phenomenon of the mirror effect. By doing absolutely nothing, you force them to sit alone with the ugly, echoing resonance of their own words. The silence in the room amplifies their absurdity. The lack of your resistance suddenly makes their aggression look incredibly pathetic, even to themselves. You will witness a fascinating sequence of events as they realize their master key no longer fits the lock of your mind. First, they will escalate. They will throw sharper insults, invent wilder accusations, and attempt to poke at your deepest insecurities, desperately trying to jumpstart the emotional machine they are used to controlling. They will mock your silence, calling you arrogant, cold, or cowardly, hoping that shame will force you to open your mouth. If you hold your ground and maintain that chilling, unbothered silence, their escalation will abruptly shatter into a spectacular internal collapse. The foundation of their dominance was entirely built on the illusion that they could dictate your emotional state. Confronted with the undeniable reality that they have lost access to your internal world, their ego begins to fracture. You are no longer a person to them in that moment. You become an impenetrable, terrifying void that reflects their own profound emptiness back at them. The smug confidence they wore like armor melts into a frantic, nervous energy. They begin to over-explain themselves. They begin to stutter, backtrack, or violently storm out of the room, fleeing from the unbearable weight of their own irrelevance. This is the poetic justice of the psychological universe. You did not have to fire a single shot to win the war. You merely had to stop supplying the enemy with ammunition. Watching this unraveling is a deeply sobering experience. You suddenly realize how fragile their power always was. It was never real. It was a phantom, a hallucination sustained entirely by your willingness to believe in it. The monster under the bed was only a shadow cast by your own fear of not being understood. As they drown in the chaotic sea of their own unreturned aggression, you stand safely on the shore, untouched, unbothered, and entirely whole. You have starved the parasite, and in doing so, you have finally learned how to feed your own soul. Part 4. The existential elevation and the birth of the sovereign mind. Witnessing their chaotic collapse from the quiet heights of your restraint is the precise catalyst required to trigger your own existential evolution. You are no longer merely surviving interpersonal conflict. You are beginning to transcend the very fabric of ordinary human frailty. When you realize that the desperate urge to be understood by everyone is a symptom of a weak mind, you naturally begin to shed the heavy, suffocating skin of the herd. You are stepping onto the lonely but magnificent path toward what Friedrich Nietzsche envisioned as the Übermensch, the overman, the individual who has entirely overcome the desperate need for external moral validation. You begin to operate from a deeply internalized center of gravity. This transition is not without its own unique sorrow. As you elevate your consciousness, a profound mourning takes place. You grieve the illusion that the world is a fair place where truth inevitably triumphs in the court of public opinion. You realize that the vast majority of humanity is sleepwalking, trapped in endless loops of emotional reactivity, desperately trading their peace of mind for fleeting moments of perceived victory. But this grief is swiftly replaced by an intoxicating, liberating clarity. You no longer walk into a room wondering what people think of you. You walk in, secure in the absolute knowledge of who you are, indifferent to the fragile judgments of the crowd. Your identity is no longer up for negotiation. This sovereign mindset drastically alters the way you perceive the concept of truth. In the past, you believed that your truth was fragile and required constant defending, lest it be destroyed by the lies of others. Now, you understand that truth is an immovable mountain. It does not require your frantic defense. It does not care if the blind refuse to see it. It does not demand a lawyer. It simply exists. By refusing to argue your reality with those committed to their delusions, you are treating your truth with the profound reverence it deserves. You become a guardian of your own internal sanctum. You will notice that people begin to treat you differently. There is a palpable, almost intimidating aura around a human being who cannot be emotionally manipulated. Predators instinctively recognize that there is no feast to be had in your presence, and they will move on to easier, more reactive prey. Meanwhile, those of genuine substance will be drawn to the quiet, unshakable peace you radiate. You have become a lighthouse in a sea of emotional storms. You do not need to prove your strength by fighting the waves. Your strength is proven simply by standing tall while the waters rage around you. This is the ultimate mastery of the self, a state of being where your peace is unconditionally yours, untethered from the chaotic behaviors of a deeply wounded world. Part 5. Letting go of the rope and the ultimate revelation. This profound evolution into sovereign self-mastery brings us directly to the threshold of the ultimate revelation. I promised you at the very beginning of our journey, after navigating the agony of over-explanation, unlocking the terrifying power of silence, starving the psychological parasite, and transcending the limitations of the herd, you are finally ready to hear the deepest, most life-altering truth about human conflict. It is a truth so painfully simple, yet so radically destructive to your ego, that once you fully absorb it, you will never look at another argument the same way again. The ultimate revelation is this: you never actually needed to win the tug-of-war. You only needed to realize that you could drop the rope. For your entire life, you have been standing in the mud, your hands bleeding, your muscles burning, pulling with all your might against people who are determined to drag you into their darkness. You thought the only way to survive was to pull harder, to use more facts, to scream louder, to find the perfect combination of words that would finally pull them over to your side of the truth. But the rope itself is the illusion. The rope is the toxic attachment. The rope is the false belief that their perception of you has any bearing on your actual existence. The moment you open your bruised hands and let the rope fall to the ground, the war is instantly over. They will violently fall backward into the mud of their own making, fueled by the momentum of their own hatred, while you remain standing, entirely unburdened. Dropping the rope means accepting the brutal, beautiful reality that some people will forever misunderstand you, and that is completely fine. It means making peace with the villain they have painted you as in the story of their lives, knowing that their story is a work of absolute fiction. You do not need to correct the narrative. You do not need to sneak into their minds and rewrite the script. You only need to walk away. The universe does not require you to be universally loved, understood, or validated to live a life of profound meaning and peace. From this day forward, let them be wrong about you. Let them whisper their distorted versions of the truth. Let them celebrate their hollow victories in the echo chambers of their own ignorance. You have something infinitely more valuable than their validation. You have yourself. You have reclaimed your mind, your energy, and your sacred time on this earth. You are no longer a prisoner to the agony of communication, nor a casualty of herd morality. You are a sovereign entity, moving silently and powerfully through a noisy world, armed with the undeniable knowledge that the greatest victory of all is simply refusing to fight a battle that was never yours to begin with. The final part. In the chaotic theater of human interaction, the ultimate victory lies not in shouting the loudest, but in mastering the profound alchemy of silence. The agonizing compulsion to constantly explain and defend oneself is a heavy chain binding the ego to the fleeting, unreliable opinions of others. When faced with manipulation, toxicity, or unjust accusation, retreating into an unbothered, impenetrable silence becomes a radical act of psychological sovereignty. By refusing to engage in an exhausting tug-of-war for validation, you immediately cut off the emotional life force that psychological parasites desperately need to survive. Stripped of your reaction, their aggression inevitably collapses, forcing their toxic energy to turn entirely inward while you remain anchored in quiet dignity. This journey of detachment elevates you above the desperate emotional reactivity of the herd, allowing you to recognize that your truth exists independently of anyone else's belief in it. The grandest revelation is the realization that the rope you have been pulling so furiously against your detractors is merely an illusion of attachment. Dropping that rope ends the war instantly. You do not need to correct every false narrative or convince those who are utterly committed to misunderstanding you. By relinquishing the need for universal comprehension, you reclaim your internal peace, transforming into a self-governing entity who fundamentally understands that the highest form of power is complete indifference to battles that were never yours to fight. The profound lesson GUI is your most valuable currency, and seeking external validation from toxic individuals is a bankrupt investment. True psychological power does not come from controlling how others perceive you, but from possessing absolute mastery over your own internal reactions. The desperate need to be understood by everyone is a prison created by the ego. Absolute freedom is found the moment you grant the world the permission to be completely wrong about you. How to apply this to your life? Be the pause in your daily interactions. When you feel the intense, burning urge to defend your character against petty accusations, unfair criticism, or manipulative behavior, close your mouth and simply observe. Breathe deeply, recognizing the urge to argue as a biological reflex, not a logical necessity. Let the uncomfortable silence stretch. Do not hit send on that lengthy, emotionally charged text message. Physically walk away from arguments designed only to drain your energy. Begin treating your attention as an exclusive privilege that others must earn, and consciously choose to invest your vital energy only into environments, goals, and relationships that foster your inner peace. Question for the community. Have you ever experienced a moan? Walking away and staying silent proved to be much more powerful than arguing back? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comment section below so we can all learn and draw inspiration from each other's perspectives. If you found deep value in this message, please subscribe to the channel. Your subscription directly supports our work and gives us the motivation to continue creating more meaningful, thought-provoking content for you in the future.